Hey everyone, Boise State football beat writer Ron Counts here with UCF beat writer Matt Murschel. We're going to talk a little bit of the season opener today. We're both going to kind of toss some questions back and forth to each other. But first of all, let's just talk about the magnitude of this game. I mean, I feel like this is almost for Boise State, this is a season deciding game. You win this game, you're heading to the top 25. You're up there with Cincinnati in the driver's seat for that New Year's Six bowl game. Two new coaching staffs. It's on ESPN. How are the folks in Orlando seeing this game, Matt?
Well, it's a big game. It's a huge game. I think, as you mentioned, because it's a new coaching staff, because Gus Malzahn has arrived here, and there's a lot of, there was a lot of excitement with his hiring, and because of the fact that he spent time at Auburn, and he said all the right things, talking about wanting to contend for championships, not just at the American Athletic Conference level, but at national championships. And he talked about wanting to be a top. This is a top 25 program. You're in top 20, I think is what he said. So you add all that together, and you put on the fact you're playing a Boise State team that has had a reputation for being one of the stellar group of five programs over the last decade or so. So there's a lot of attention with this. And I think, as you mentioned, Thursday night game, it's on ESPN. There's going to be a lot of eyes on this, a lot of attention. So this is really kind of their big game to kind of kick things off over the next couple of weeks. Okay, I apologize if I butcher his name. I know that junior Hank Bachmeier, is it?
That's it, you got
it. I know he got the starting nod at quarterback last week, and I wanted to ask, what does he kind of bring to the position, and what do you think? When you look at what he's been able to do, what do you think he's going to be able to do with this offense?
Well, Hank's a guy who's only started 13 games because of injuries and because of COVID, but he plays like a guy who's a 4-year starter. I mean, he's got a calm about him. Coach Avalo said that he won the job because he was more consistent running this new offense. He made the final decision better. He made the big throws better. Hank's a guy that has some experience. He's a 4-year starter in high school, came in as a 4-star recruit, but he's also just a gamer, man. He is not scared to pull the ball down and run the ball. For years, he hasn't been scared to kind of drop his shoulder and hit a guy. And that's something the coaches are trying to get out of him. But he's a guy that's going to make all the throws. He's a guy who we're told has grown in protections, has grown in his understanding of defenses. So I think he's a guy that's going to come out. He's going to hit some big plays. He's going to minimize mistakes, and he's going to keep Boise State competitive.
Was it a surprise that he got the starting nod, or was it pretty much assumed he would be the front runner for the job?
That depends on who you ask. The coaches say it was close in practice, and then USC transfer Jack Sears had some injury issues this fall, couldn't really stay on the field. Really, Hank and Coach Avalos have a relationship that goes back to Hank's high school days. They've known each other for many, many years. And again, Hank's just a guy that's proven he can do it on the field. Jack Sears is a guy who was also a 4-star recruit out of high school, went to USC, but he's only played in 2 or 3 career games in his entire career. So he just hasn't had those opportunities to prove it. So in my opinion, no, it wasn't a surprise. Boise State's going to play a pretty talented quarterback down there in UCF, and Dylan Gabriel getting some Heisman hope. Is he a guy you see as one of the best quarterbacks in the country, and what are his strengths on the field?
Yeah, I mean, I really do. I mean, based on what he's done the first 2 seasons, I mean, he arrived as a true freshman, came in January as an early enrollee, and he was in the middle of this four-player, kind of quarterback competition, a couple of years ago. And a lot of people were just kind of they were dismissing him. You remember that was when Brandon Winbush, the Notre Dame transfer, had gotten here. And they thought that, Brandon was going to get the job, and Dylan was going to kind of sit back and kind of wait. And then, it was kind of funny that in the second week of the season, Dylan took over as the starting quarterback, and he hasn't let go of the position yet. And he's shown a lot of poise. His work ethic has been one of the things they've talked a lot about. I know the coaching staff has been, and his leadership skills, and then you look at his physical abilities. I mean, he's got a strong arm. He can get the ball down the field. He throws one of the prettiest deep balls you'll ever see. Very much of a rainbow is what I've been told by a lot of coaches, and when you've seen from him down the field. And he's a cerebral guy. His dad was the former Hawaii coach, former Hawaii quarterback, back in the 80s. So he comes from a line of quarterbacks. He understands the game. He studies it a lot. And he's one of those guys that I think is just starting to take that next step. From year 1 to year 2 is a big step, and year 2 to year 3, he's really kind of grown a little bit. One of the things that the staff has told us they like about him more than anything now is that he's starting to get to a point where he can read the progressions, read the defenses, get to a point where it's second nature. He doesn't have to really think about it. And he's got more comfortable in the pocket. And the biggest thing really from the players have told us is his leadership ability. When UCF went through that coaching change, they went through about maybe 2 weeks where they didn't have a head coach. And it was Dylan Gabriel, who we were told kind of stepped up and said, listen, we got to stay together. We're going to figure this out. We're going to get a good coach, and then we're going to see what happens. So they've said his leadership has been kind of above and beyond. And I will add this, that UCF quarterback coach G.J. Kinney told me the other day that what Dylan reminds him of a little bit is Michael Vick, because Kinney played with Michael Vick in the NFL. And he said, he's got that kind of snap on the ball, and the way he can throw his intermediate passes with that kind of speed and accuracy. That's what he kind of reminded him of. He played with Tim Tebow as well. And I asked him, did he seem more like a Tim Tebow type player? And he said, no, actually, it was more like Michael Vick. He doesn't run like Michael Vick. Don't get me wrong there, but he says he does have that kind of snap and the accuracy with the arm. So I think that's what's kind of made him stood out so far this year.
If you're a dual threat quarterback, there might not be a better comparison than Michael Vick. That's high.
Yeah, when he said that, it really kind of got my attention, because oh, Michael Vick, yeah, So, and you can also see too, and I'll add this real quick, that Dylan has added some muscle over the offseason. He looks physically different than he looked last year. He said he'd added about 5 to 6 pounds, mostly muscle. And he said, he did it. He feels comfortable in his body now. He feels a little bit better. So I expect him to run the football a little bit more as well this year. Okay, this is a question I think every team gets when they come down here, especially is how do you think the Broncos are going to prepare for the warm weather of Orlando, the humidity? I know everyone tries to make a big deal about it, but when you're not from this area, it can really kind of hit you up. What have the Broncos been doing maybe to take advantage of that?
Well, being from the South myself, I can tell you that the humidity out here is a huge change. I mean, it still gets to 105, 106 degrees out here, but there being no humidity, it's actually cool in the shade. In Virginia, you'd sweat as much in the shade as you would in the sun. Out here, there is a difference. Boise State has been preparing for this, though. They've done their inferno practice, is what they call it. So last week, I believe it was Monday, they moved indoors to their indoor facility. They cranked up the heat. They cranked up the humidity, and they practice in there. That's a tradition that goes back a few years. They've had season openers at Louisiana, at Troy, at Florida State, and they've done the same thing to kind of simulate that environment. They've also been covering the balls in these kind of vinyl bags in practice to kind of simulate a wet, slippery ball. They have some experience in wet games in Florida, that's for sure. 2019, they were scheduled to open up against Florida State. Hurricane Dorian changed those plans. They got the game in, but they had to move it last second to Tallahassee. So they have some experience there. They've had good luck in those games. They're undefeated in those season openers in humid environments. They're 3-0 there. So I think they're ready for that environment.
Yeah, it's something I don't think teams kind of think about until they get down here. Luckily, it's a night game. It's not like a noon or 1 o'clock kickoff on Saturday or something like that, because that's when it really can really kind of knock you out, and that's where a lot of teams kind of struggle with it.
Sure. So Matt, there's a lot of talk about UCF's offense right now, but there's been some attrition at the running back position. So they lost their top 2 rushers from a year ago. Then this year, a third rusher gets kicked off the team. RJ Harvey's out for this season. How much of a concern is depth at that position, and who's going to carry the load?
Yeah, I think I don't know if it's always say it was a concern, but I think you have to definitely think about it a lot, because again, they came into this. The idea was Montavious Thompson, who was the kind of third string running back on this team. He was more of their big power rusher. He's not on the team anymore. He surprisingly kind of was we found out that he wasn't going to be on the team this year. That meant that RJ Harvey, who was kind of a transfer from Virginia, who came in as a quarterback and then made the switch to running back, he expected to be kind of maybe the guy to take up a majority of the load. He looked really good in spring. He was really kind of working well in that position. They went out and they also got Isaiah Bowser, a player from Northwestern. And then Harvey goes down with his injury. So now all of a sudden Bowser, who's really kind of the most experienced running back on the roster, he ends up kind of taking over more of the idea if he's going to be the top runner. My guess is he's going to share that load with Mark Anthony Richards, who's another transfer from Auburn, who was hurt last year. I think he's familiar with Gus Malzahn. I think they'll probably somehow do some sort of rotation. UCF also has 3 guys who on the roster from last year. Johnny Richardson, who's a very fast speedster out of the backfield. Demarius Good, another young running back as well. And then Trillian Coles, who came in with Montavious Thompson during his recruiting class. He was hurt last year, so he didn't play. So they've got 3 guys who got a little bit of experience on the roster, but haven't really had an opportunity to play. Then they also got a freshman coming in, Anthony Williams, who's a guy that's supposed to be really highly touted. I think he rushed for over 2,000 yards in high school the last couple of years. So they've got depth at the position. It's just the experience factor. And like I said, so I think Bowser's probably more than likely going to get some of the early carries. I think you're going to see a little bit mixing things up there. But yeah, when you look at this roster, most of it, there was a lot of experience. Running back was probably the biggest position of concern.
What stands out about Bowser in the field?
Oh, he's a big guy, really big guy. And he's a bruising runner. I mean, he's got, like I said, the experience factor. He played in the Big Ten championship game a couple of years ago. He was going to be the starter this last year at Northwestern, and then he got nicked up a little bit. But we've seen him so far a couple times, and he's a big guy, a big runner. The question is, is he I don't know if he's going to be a full-time, carry the ball 25 times a game type rusher, or if they're going to try to mix it up. I think based on what Gus Malzahn has done in the past, I think they'll probably mix it up a little bit, bring in some young guys, especially some of those speedsters from the outside. I think they're going to try to use that. Johnny Richardson has been using kickoff returns as well. Very fast, one of the faster guys on the team. We kind of talked a little bit about this before. There's a lot of excitement going into this game. And I know Boise State in the past has traveled really well to these games. Do you expect them to have a large contingency of fans coming down for this game?
I do. There's a lot of excitement. BSU Twitter is all abuzz about this game. There have been 3 or 4 fan events already scheduled in the Orlando area where Boise State fans are going to gather. And you're right, Boise State is a fan base that travels really, really well. I mean, they've had good showings in all their big games. You think back to 2010, they traveled across the country to play Virginia Tech in FedEx Field. So it's just, that they have no problem traveling. And as you mentioned, this is a huge game for them. I mean, it's not only is it Andy Avalos' first game as a head coach, it's just such a season defining game. You win this game, you're in that driver's seat, not for a Mountain West championship, but for a New Year's Six bowl game. Cincinnati is in that driver's seat right now. They opened the season number 8 in the preseason AP preseason poll. They're their competition right now. But if Boise State beats UCF, all these fans know it's only uphill from here. If they lose, there's a lot of questions that have to be answered. So there's going to be a lot of eyeballs on this game.
Yeah, I know. I was at the Florida State game. What was it, a couple of years ago? When Boise State was there, and I remember the thing that stood out to me was I was on the field at the last couple of minutes of that game, and I couldn't believe how loud the Boise State fans were. They really did a good job of droning out the Florida State fans who were there. So I thought it was incredible, and so I was excited to know how many fans maybe would come down for this game, particularly with everything that's going on in the country.
And that Florida State game was so huge for so many guys on this team. I mean, it was Hank Bachmeier's first career start. He had to engineer a second half comeback. Khalil Shakir was a young up and coming receiver at that point. He had some of the biggest catch of his career in that game. So that was a career defining game for some of these guys.
Yeah, and it was, like I said, it stood out. And considering the trouble they had to get to that game, you mentioned it with the hurricane forcing the game to be moved from Jacksonville. I remember there was a lot of chaos and confusion going on there. For to have that all go on, and then really it looked like Florida State in the beginning was going to roll in that game, and then to see the way Boise State handled the second half was pretty incredible.
The defense really, really struggled last year. The offense was all the rage, but the defense didn't stop many teams. They bring in Big Cat Bryant, one of the best names in college football as a transfer this year. I mean, how good is this defense going to be this year? Is it going to be better than last year?
Yeah, I think it is. Listen, they were ranked 123rd last year, and they really struggled. And part of that was, they lost a lot of talent. They had some guys opt out. Kalia Davis, their talented defensive lineman, he opted out because of COVID situation. Tay Gowan, who was their starting cornerback, he opted out because of COVID. He got COVID. I think he got COVID, and his daughter, I think, was worried about his daughter at the time too as well. So he didn't play at all last year. So they had to rely on the young guys. And then in mid-season, they lost a couple defenders from some off the field issues. They had a couple players, they got a player get arrested, and then they involved some of the players, and they got removed from the team. So that really hampered what they were able to do. So they had to rely on, a lot of young talent. They actually played 2 true freshmen at cornerback for most of the season last year, which was basically throwing these guys into the fire. And as well as they were talented, it was tough to deal with. And you saw that kind of catch up with them as well. So that's going to be different this year. They've got some experience. Davis is back. He said having a year off really helped his body. He looks in great shape. And then they bring in a guy like Big Cat Bryant, who is, if you look at his workouts, we watch him on Instagram. He looks amazing. He told us on media day, he wants to prove to everyone he's the best defensive player in the country. He says if anyone gets in his way, he's going to run him over, basically. So he's very, very a great interview, very boisterous. I think that's going to be huge for them. Then they bring in, a new coaching staff. Travis Williams comes in as their new defensive coordinator, and he's a more high energy octane guy. He wants these guys running around. They're going to tackle better. They've done a good job of bringing in 2 coaches for the defensive line, for defensive tackles and ends. Everyone has told us that's helped them kind of understand what they want to do up front. And their linebackers are experienced. The secondary is going to probably be the biggest questions, but they do have some talent there as well. So this is a defense I think that will play better. It's going to be multiple from what Travis Williams has told us. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but he thinks they're going to change things up game to game. And they're going to rotate some guys. They feel like they've got enough talent there. They brought in some guys, like you mentioned, Bryant, and some other defenders they feel like can step in there as well. So if the defense can play better than it did last year, and the offense is in the same sort of caliber that it's been the last couple of years, this is where this team can have some success. When they were winning in 2017 and 2018, the defense was playing really well. The last couple of years, they haven't seen that. And I think that's been the biggest hurdle for them, because they were in, I think it was 6 or 8 of their losses the last 2 years were by 1 score. And there were second half games that they gave up second half, they gave up halftime leads and really kind of lost the game in the second half. So that's because of the defense. So I do believe the defense will be better. How much better, it just remains to be seen right now. What should concern UCF about Boise State? And what do you think is going to be the biggest concern for UCF, going into this game?
I think for any team facing UCF, it's their team speed. I mean, from top to the bottom, the running backs, the receivers, the corners, the safeties. We talked earlier about how much talent there is in high school football in the state of Florida, and these guys are just speed demons. So Boise State is going to have to be very aware of that. They know they're going to have some one-on-one, man-to-man matchups on the outside at cornerback, and Boise State has two new starters at corner. So that's going to be very interesting to see how that goes. In terms of what should concern UCF, it should be Boise State's defense. They were good last year, and they're even better this year. They returned 8 super seniors this year, and I believe 5 of them are on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, they've got a lot of experience on every level. Starting with nose tackle Scaly Gahan, who's a guy who's kind of underperformed to his potential to this point, but he's really transformed his body this year. He's out there looking like Aaron Donald. He's 290, 295, and just running around like he's crazy. Defensive tackle Scott Matlock's put on 15 pounds this year. So the defensive line had a lot of issues last year just getting bodies on the field. I mean, there was a game where they had to bring an offensive lineman over to the defensive line because they didn't have enough players against Colorado State last year. So they've shown a lot of growth there. They've got 2 redshirt seniors at linebacker in Riley Wimpy and Zeke Noah, guys that have played a lot of football. And then they have 2 physically scary safeties on the back end. J.L. Skinner's a guy who's 6'4", probably 215, 220. Tyreek Jones is 6'2", 210. Both of them have a lot of range. They're going to get to a lot of balls. They're going to make a lot of plays in the box this year. So I think Boise State's defense is for sure going to be best in the Mountain West, and I think it could be top 20 or 30 in the country.
Yeah, we talk about experience. It's hard to imagine 5 super seniors on a defense. That experience is really tough to kind of deal with. When you're young team, especially in the first game where you're just trying to learn who's doing what.
Mm-hmm. So jumping back to a UCF question, we talked about how 2 new coaching staffs in this game this year. So Gus Malzahn's offense, how is it going to be different from what UCF has run in the past?
That's an interesting question, because Gus has been asked this multiple times, throughout the camps, obviously, and he kind of answers it by saying, that it's going to be high powered, it's going to be explosive, and he says, they're going to try to build off what UCF has done in the past. And, when you look at what Gus Malzahn has done, in his previous tenure, at Auburn, they were not nearly as explosive as UCF, obviously, and they were more heavily on the run, I think, at times, but Gus Malzahn hasn't had a quarterback like Dylan Gabriel, and I think he understands that. He understands that Dylan's a different type of quarterback. They have a lot of options on the receiver position. I do believe they're going to throw the football, and whether they throw as deep and often as they've done in the last couple of years remains to be seen. I think they're going to mix the run in a little bit more. I think when UCF had success in 2017, 2018, it was based a lot heavily on the run game. They were able to run the football a lot more. And Mackenzie, Milton obviously was a big factor of that as well. But I think, they're going to mix in the run game as much as they can, but they're going to try to push the ball downfield. I think they're going to keep the tempo going. I don't think they're going to go back to doing a huddle. Obviously, Gus is the creator of the no huddle offense. So he's the guy who's not going to probably use the huddle. I expect them to try to do a lot of screens. I expect them to mix things up a little bit with some of their formations. Will they look anything like they did, last couple of years? We're just not sure. Everyone that we've spoken with has kept it really guarded secret about this. But I do think they're going to mix it up. I do think they're going to throw the football a lot more. And I think it's going to be exciting. That's the pitch they've been throwing out to the fans and to the media. It's going to be exciting type of football. So he does have a lot of options there. What I'm interested in is Gus Malzahn mentioned before when he got hired that he's going to return to doing play calling duties. And that was a huge deal because last couple of years, if you remember at Auburn, he didn't do play calling duties. And I think I think things lagged a little bit. So he wants to come in there. He's got renewed energy. He wants to do play calling. It's going to be interesting to see kind of where some of that comes from and what they're able to do with that. But I think it's going to look very similar, but they're going to add maybe a little bit more of a running attack to kind of mix things up. All right. How do you think this game will unfold, and what do you think is going to be a key factor or two from this game?
So I think it has a chance to be a high-scoring game. And to be honest, if it's the higher the score gets, the better the chance it is that UCF wins that game because they have so much talent on the outside. But Boise State has some athletes on the outside as well. Khalil Shakir, C.T. Thomas, those are guys that are just burners out there. And Shakir is a guy that's a probably top 15 receiver in the country. You know, he's a guy that's going to get some NFL draft buzz this postseason. So I think the receivers are going to get most of the publicity. But I think this game is decided on the ground. You talked about UCF's running game. You talked about how Gus Malzahn wants to run the ball. Boise State is desperate to run the ball this year. They really struggled last year. George Halani missed all but really one game. They only averaged 107.1 rushing yards a game last season. That's the fewest in 2 decades around here. Boise State relies on the running game. They've really invested in that in this offseason. They brought in Oregon transfer Cyrus Habibi-Likio, who's really a guy that's similar to George Halani in that he can do a little bit of everything. He's got some power. He's got some speed. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. So I think he's going to kind of be he and Harlani are going to be a good 1-2 punch this year. They also have a JUCO transfer, Tyquan Tyler, who missed last season with a Achilles injury. He's really, really versatile, really explosive as well. Then they have a big body back, Andrew Van Buren, who carried the load last year, led the Mountain West with 8 rushing touchdowns. He's probably weighing 240 pounds these days. Not super explosive, but can definitely move the line, can get those tough yards. So if Boise State can run the ball, I think they win the game. If they can't, UCF runs away with it.
Yeah, that's one of the things I think that people have found is if you can't keep up with UCF offensively, if you let them score a lot of points quickly, it becomes a track meet, and it's very few teams have been able to kind of to stay up with them in a track meet when it comes down said and done.
Last one for me. So it's been quite a while since Boise State's played in front of a packed house. I think their last capacity stadium was the 2019 Las Vegas Bowl. What can they expect from this bounce house environment?
Well, what's interesting is, this is the first time I think the UCF has played at home in front of a full crowd since 2019 as well, late 2019 against USF. The bounce house is a unique venue. And what I say that is it's when you get there and it's packed, one of the things that it's known for is as soon as they start playing this song, Zombie Nation, the fans start jumping up and down and the place actually kind of sways. And it startles people if you've never been there before. And if you're in press box, I've put up videos of this before. You see like the water bottles and the things start to sway a little bit. It kind of gets people, a little thrown off there. It's a raucous crowd, and they have 12,000 students. They have student sections on both sides of the stadium, both end zones. It can be really kind of a great atmosphere. When it's full, I expect it to be. I think they sold 98% of the season tickets, if I'm not mistaken. So I expect there to be a good crowd. They expect this to almost be, I'm not saying sellout just yet, but I think they feel it's going to be a full crowd. So the atmosphere is going to be amazing. And I think, there's cabanas on the field as well. So the fans, some premier seating is on the field as well. So fans are going to be there. So it's going to be an interesting game, a big crowd. And I expect fans, Boise State fans will be kind of surprised when things get kind of kicked off.
And at this point, are there any COVID protocols for game day? Any mask requirements, vaccine requirements, anything like that?
No vaccine requirements. Our state, is not mandating that at this point. UCF is asking fans, if you can get vaccinated, please get vaccinated. Obviously, they want to make sure that's being, kind of pushed out. They are strongly recommending that you wear masks indoors. Now, again, that's if you go to the restrooms, places like that inside the stadium, they would suggest that you wear a mask. They are providing masks if you'd like one, and also that they're asking fans to make sure you wash your hands, routinely. They're going to have hand sanitizer stations, everywhere around the stadium as well. And if you're not feeling well, or if you had COVID, or you've been quarantined, obviously they're asking you not to go to the game. So those are really kind of the kind of restrictions right now in place. I've been told by the school that if anything comes up in the next week or so, anything changes, they'll make some sort of announcement to let people know. But at this point, there's no, proof of vaccination or negative COVID test that's required to get in.
Perfect.
So, and it's and by with that, I expect there to. That's why another reason I expect there to be a pretty good sized crowd going on, because again, I think there are going to be a lot of fans who are excited to see what's happening with Gus and everything. And as we talked about, this is a big game. I think this is going to be there'll be a lot of excitement and buzz for it as well.
Absolutely. Matt, if I could, let me sneak one more question in for you.
Yeah.
You mentioned Mackenzie Milton. How do he and Dylan Gabriel compare on the field? Are they similar athletically and as quarterbacks, or are they very different?
I think there's a lot of similarities. They're both dual threat guys. I think I would look at Dylan maybe a little bit better passer in some regards. Especially on the deep ball. But I also would give the nod to Mackenzie, at least when he was healthy, to this idea that he was able, he was more a gamer at times. And I don't. That's not disrespect to Dylan. I mean, when you saw what Mackenzie did, especially late in 2017 and 2018, he kind of put the team on his shoulders and went out there and, kind of carried them at times, especially late in games as well. So, I think for me, Mackenzie was a little bit better of a runner, and I think Dylan's much more of a better passer in a lot of regards, especially deep balls. So, and now when I look at the two, I mean, it's incredible to think Mackenzie's now up in Florida State right now, and he's trying to come back from that horrific knee injury. And you look at where Dylan is now. Those two were very close. Those two actually, Dylan followed Mackenzie at his high school in Hawaii and actually broke all Mackenzie's records, and then came here and then ended up really kind of came to UCF because of Mackenzie Milton in a lot of ways, and so he ended up hanging out with Milton, his mom and his family there. And I think that helped him kind of embrace what's going on. And now that Milton's gone, this is really, Dylan Gabriel's team right now.
Matt, this was great. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, very much
this is
so.
really informative. I'm super pumped for this opener. I can't wait to get out there. And I guess I'll see you in Orlando.
Yeah, I guess so. And safe travels for everyone who's making the trip down here. And hopefully the weather will be outstanding and no one will have anything major to worry about.